So the Hanna Cat Stretch series starts with what is called the Four Corners practice. And there's several ways of coming into this, and I'm just going to give you a couple of variations as we go with this. So you can work with it with your legs straight, um, and therefore you're going to feel some of those little pulls in your lower back. And in this case, well, then you would feel into each hip by, for example, if I go into my left hip, by just slightly taking my leg up into gravity and then easing it off, and then going, of course, to the other side and doing the same kind of thing. It probably is a little more focused around the core if you have your knees bent, and then you can start to feel how you drop into that hip if you start to, once again, on the left side, just start to take your left foot a little bit up into gravity and feel that lightening of your foot on the floor and how it takes your hip more solidly into the floor. And then just let it ease off. And then just coming to the right side and trying the same kind of thing of just taking your leg a little bit up into gravity, feeling how it starts to bring the weight across to the right side, and then letting ease off. Now, as we start to drop into this, it's always useful to come to some basic orienting question. So it could be something like why am I here, or how am I here? In other words, what is the intention I'm bringing to this? Because inevitably you are going to come into these movements as if they're an exercise, as if there's something that maybe has a little bit of an underlying intention to get rid of the aches and pains, the stiffnesses in our body. And so to consider the possibility that as you enter into this, your intention is going to slowly move you more to just inhabiting yourself as you are in this moment, to feeling how you are in this moment, then allows you to start to see what the unfolding of dropping into yourself is more, and what movements come out of that process. So it becomes a shifting of intention from how we typically would start by just noticing where you are and then how your body responds to these different stimuli. So if we come to the other two parts of the four corners of the shoulders, so come to the left shoulder, and there's several ways, again, you can drop into this. So the first one is just to bring your arm up into gravity a bit, just as you were with your leg, and to feel how that starts to bring more weight into that shoulder blade, and to really start to explore the sensations of the contact. It's really easy to kind of feel what's in the shoulder blade itself, but it doesn't necessarily orient towards a surface. So just to feel into how you know that surface is there starts to really initiate a relational experience between you and the world that you're in. How much can that shoulder find the floor? And then just watching the easing off. You'll hear me talk as we go through this whole series about how important the easing off is. So just to kind of feel what happens as you let down, and then bring your attention across to the right shoulder and start to notice, how can I find the floor more, the sensations of floor more, as I start to bring my arm a little bit up into gravity, and to feel how that starts to affect my shoulder. How much does it know the floor is there? What other parts of me start to try to engage with this? And are there parts that I can feel are being held out of the movement? Perhaps something in your torso, your neck, your lower back, your knees, and just to kind of do a scan through your body and see what parts of you might be wanting to start to participate and have been held out of that movement. So that question of how does it want to go becomes really useful around just allowing the different parts of you to engage. And then an alternative for the arms is to bring them straight up into the air, as if your fingers were pointing toward the ceiling, So now the full of gravity is coming straight down through your arms, and then noticing what happens if you take your left arm and start to lengthen through it, as if you were sort of letting an amoeba protoplasm surge go through your arm, so it lightens the pressure on the floor, and just feel how that affects your torso. Perhaps the other shoulder blade gets affected, and then letting that ease back off. And then the alternative to that is to go down into the floor, and you can feel how just following that shoulder blade more directly into the floor affects the shoulder blade, the sense of the arm, the torso, and perhaps even the sense of how the right arm and shoulder are engaged with the floor. And then just slowly letting that ease off. So if you just notice how far you've got with this now, so that's always the third piece, is like the moving into the movement, the letting down out of the movement, and then the just noticing what you have, which sometimes can be the biggest part of the movement, is just letting the reorganization happen. So now if we come to the right shoulder and just feel what happens if you start to lengthen out through that arm, and how that affects the other shoulder, the torso, the pelvis, and just the neck, and just see how your body wants to move into that. How does it want to go? And then just letting that ease off, noticing the process of coming back to the resting place. And once you're in that kind of neutral starting place, which may now feel different than it was before, then increasing the pressure into that right shoulder blade and watching what happens through the rest of your body as you explore that stronger engagement of your shoulder blade with the floor. And then just letting that ease off. And then you can just let your arms come back down so that they're resting on the floor wherever they want to be. Perhaps even you might want to test and see what happens with your body, with your legs, if you let your legs straighten out as well, and just kind of revisit whatever contact there is through your back, however much arching there is in your lower back, how much your neck and head allow the floor to be there. So that these are points of reference that we can come back to throughout this process. So each of these movements is something it could be done by itself. This could be half an hour of just exploring this alone. Let's move on to the first full movement that happens in this, which is the basic arch and curl. So once again, your knees are bent and feet flat on the floor, and just notice how you come into this position, what's your sense of yourself, your sense of contact with the floor. And then let's try first of all going into the arch. And so I'm going to describe the ways you can come into it through your lower body, first of all. And so first of all, you might notice that if you just lighten your feet on the floor, that it starts to create a pulling into your lower back and a bit of a rotating of your pelvis as your back arches. And then that tightening up your spine goes up into the neck, so there'll be a bit of a tilting backward with your head as the arching goes into your neck. And then you might experiment with what happens if you allow your arms to turn outward. So there's an external rotation in your arms. And as you go into that, potentially, and it may not be you in this moment, but potentially it could go as far as the pressure being mostly on just your head and your pelvis. So you really can get a full arching and perhaps a lifting of your shoulder blades off the ground, but only if it wants to do that. You really want to follow the sense of ease. Otherwise you stop at the upper end. Always you stop at the upper end of your movement where you start feeling pushback or effort, and hang out there and soak in the sensations of it, so that as you drop back off it, you can feel that letting down. So now as you go into the curl part of it, you start to get a flattening of your lower back on the floor, which is enhanced by a slight pressing of your feet. And then as that lengthens up through your spine, you may find that there's a lengthening up through the back of your spine, which goes back into the back of your head. And you may find that it's just, your head just wants to come up off the floor as your pelvis is also kind of releasing its pressure on the floor, so that you feel like a slinky that's just kind of lengthening as it also starts to curve, and your hands, your arms turn inward as far as they want to go. And so all of that is enhanced by that. And again, just as far as it wants to go with ease. An alternative to that is, as you come back down to resting, is, let's just come revisit that again for a moment, is to bring your hands together, cupping the back of your neck or even the back of your skull, that first place where the skull meets the neck, or the occipital area, so that as you come up, you're either taking the head and the hands as a unit, so you're not actually lifting your head, but you're feeling how the arms and the head can come up as a unit as you go into the curl. Or alternatively, if you really feel that your neck doesn't know how to lengthen, is just gently stroking with your fingers along the back of your neck to give them that sensory feel of what lengthening can be like. And then just letting all of that come back down, allowing yourself to soak in the sensations for a moment of the resting place, and then going back into the arch. Now, as you go into this, some people find it easier to start the movement with your head first of all. So I typically describe it from the foot up, but you might find that you find it works really well for you to let your head go back, let the arching start in your neck, your arms start to rotate outward, and then slowly feeling that arching going down your back, into your lower back, and then feeling how the pelvis starts to rotate, and really getting the arch initiating from top down. So it's worthwhile exploring both ways, and then just coming back down to your resting point. So that's the arch and curl. How often is it useful to do these things? I find that often doing any one of these 3 times, so there's kind of like the first time is kind of an awakening, the second time is your body starting to make sense of it, and then the third time is kind of the integration. It starts to kind of feel like it's starting to really move to a different place, is often like a minimum that is really useful. And so sometimes I'll do a little less as I'm demonstrating this today, and sometimes a little bit more, and we'll just kind of know that that's kind of a good sweet spot to start with. And then Hanna said anything up to 10 times, but you find what works for you in your own practice. So once we've done the arch and curl, well, then we start taking the integration of that 4 corners experience and the arch and curl and bring it into the diagonal arch and curl. Now, Hanna's approach to the diagonal arch and curl for the lower body was, as you went into the arch, he suggested bringing either both knees or one knee across to the side. So if you started by coming across to the left, then you will start to feel how the pelvis starts to rotate a bit and the weight comes into that left hip. Now, one of the things that I find challenging about this is that some of us who are really flexible can then just drop our knees way across. And what you want to do is to really think of it as just a bit of a weight transfer. So another way of kind of getting the sense of how far you should go is coming across just a little bit and then taking that left foot and just lightening it on the floor, the surface you're on, so that you can feel as that foot comes up into gravity how you're just getting a bit of weight into the back of your hip. So you wouldn't want to go any further than that sort of dimple in your butt just before you come to the hip itself, the movable hip. And so that's about as far as you would go, and the right knee could follow along beside it, or you could just let the knee stay in center as that left knee falls out. And so just kind of, you have some options there to kind of play with as you get the weight coming across towards the left side. At the same time as you're coming across to the left side, in your upper body, you take your arm, and similarly to how I described bringing your hands behind your head or neck in the arch and curl, you bring your right hand somewhere behind your neck or head, wherever it feels like it's comfortable, with the elbow dropping out somewhat. And as your left knee and pelvis start to kind of get more engagement, you turn out to the right with your upper body. So your head follows a kind of, how does it want to go, turning out to the right. The elbow may drop a little bit more as you do that, and you should feel a little bit more weight coming into that right shoulder blade as your weight transfers across to the right. So you start to get a connection between this right shoulder blade and the left hip, with an opening diagonally across the center of your body and an arching diagonally across the back line of your body. And just to feel into that, find the limitation in this moment, and then just ease out of it. And I'm going to show you the variation where you go immediately into the curl. So what that would mean is that as your head comes up towards center, your elbow follows with it, so that as you come up towards center line, now you reach with your left hand and grab the back of your hamstring, back of your thigh, as your knees have come back towards center, and you draw your knee upwards towards the elbow, so that your head and shoulder are starting to rotate a little bit towards the left, and the left knee is coming a little bit across center line toward the right, so that they either have elbow and knee touch to each other or slightly bypass each other, as you kind of get a bit of a twist of your upper body turning to the left and your lower body rotating to the right. So you feel more weight now in the back of the right hip and more weight into the left shoulder blade, and just really locating those and letting your body find its pathway into that. And then slowly letting yourself come back down to resting again. So you could do just that on between the left hip and the right shoulder several times if you wanted to just see what they would do, but it often is useful to let an area rest for a bit and do its integration while you come to the other side, so that you would just come across with your left hand now behind your head or neck, wherever it works for you, cupping the back of it, and now you let the right knee fall out a little bit. If it helps for you to take that foot a little bit up into gravity, that leg, so you really feel the engagement into the back of the right hip, allow your head to turn out toward the left, toward that elbow, feel the connection into the back of the right hip and the left shoulder, and just drop into that and explore how there's an opening across the front of your body and an engagement across the back of your body between that right hip and left shoulder blade. And then just letting that ease off. Come back to center. And then as your head comes back to center and the elbow is following it, going an arc across the ceiling as it points more toward the ceiling, then as you come across center line, reach down with your right arm, cup the back of your right hamstring, and see what it's like to have the knee and the elbow come more towards each other as you're twisting with your upper body more to the right and twisting with your lower body more toward the left. And just explore, where is the path of ease with this? How far does it want to go before it starts running into effort? And just keeping yourself in the field of following that path of ease, feeling the upper edge of its movement where it meets against disorganization, feeling the sensations of that so you have some sense of what you're letting back down from as you come back to a rest. And just letting yourself take that in for a moment. And then we're going to come across one more time so you can see how this might evolve for you. So now your right arm and hand are going to come up to support the back of your head. And we're going to let the weight go across into the left hip, your head across towards the right elbow, feeling into that right shoulder blade, that left hip, noticing how the head wants to move with this, how the arch might want to form across your back. So letting it find its pathway. How does it want to go? A sense of opening across the front. So there's really that slinky sense of how there's kind of like an engagement across the center that's got a sense of opening as much as a strengthening in it. And then just letting that ease off. Letting the elbow come back up to center. And then as it crosses center and your head starts to come up off the ground a little bit, let your hand come behind the left knee and just see what kind of diagonal arch and curl wants to happen as you come up, and then slowly letting back down again once you find the end range. Letting that rest. Feeling the differences between your pelvis and your shoulders in this particular moment. And then knowing there's probably a lot to learn just there, now see what happens if you bring your left hand up behind your head or neck. Let your elbow and head come across toward the left. Let your right knee and foot help engage that right hip a little bit more so you feel the connection between the left shoulder blade and the right hip. Maybe there's a little more lift in that arching between those 2 points. Just letting yourself explore how far it wants to go, feeling the sensations of the end range, then letting down from that. Letting your elbow and head come back up towards center, and as it comes towards center, reaching behind your knee on the right side, and as your head comes up off the floor and moves toward the right, your knee comes up and across a little bit more toward the left, and feeling how there's a release of pressure from that right hip and that left shoulder blade. And then just letting that back down again. And then just give yourself a chance to reconnect about how your connection is with the ground, maybe even testing to see if there's any difference now with your legs straight for a moment. Just getting a sense of how that is. The next movement is the steeple movement. So your knees are bent, feet flat on the floor. And as with the first four corners movement where we had the arms pointing right toward the ceiling, you bring your arms straight up toward the ceiling as if you were reaching toward the ceiling. But you bring your hands, your palms of your hands together as if you were kind of like a diver getting ready to head off with your pointed fingers pointing straight toward the ceiling. And the movement with your upper body is going to engage with those shoulder blades, but by keeping your arms straight. So the trick with this is to make sure that your elbows don't bend, so you really get an engagement right through your arms into your shoulders. And I'll show you why this is so important. If you bring this whole thing that's called a steeple in Hanna's lexicon, so if you start to shift those hands across to the left a bit, you'll feel that it brings a little bit more weight into that left shoulder blade, but there's also a tendency for the left elbow to collapse. So you want to probably one of the only times in your life where you could say hyperextension at your elbow is good to keep it totally straight as you come across. So you really get the sense of engagement down into that shoulder blade. And sometimes the amount that your body can move across following just a path of ease might not be that far. It will depend on each person. So it really tells us how much our torso and shoulder blades can coordinate a rotational movement. And your head, as you come across, your nose follows your hands, so you don't turn further than the hands go. So it really helps the neck to coordinate with the shoulders and the rest of the torso. Then come back towards center. Then slowly come across to the right with your hands now and watch that right elbow and feel how it can drive more pressure down into that right shoulder blade. Now you might be noticing already that your knees want to counterbalance, and especially if you bring your knees pretty close together in your feet, you'll see that there's a counterbalancing weight transfer as you come across to the right shoulder with the left hip. And that's exactly what you're looking for, is to kind of get that engagement with that left hip and that right shoulder, and just seeing how much your body wants to move into that, and then easing back off it, coming to center, and then coming back across toward the left with your upper body, and letting your knees fall a little bit across to the right with your lower body. So this movement is so simple, and it really does focus on finding the path of ease, of just letting your head follow the hand, letting your body find where there's jerkiness, disorganization in the movement, and just gradually finding how the path of smoothness wants to emerge as you move back and forth. And just try that a few times, feeling into the end range. It's a really powerful way of helping the shoulder blades start to engage and helping a connection between tensions that happen in the rib cage part of your spine connect with tensions up into your neck, so that they start to be able to understand each other more. Let your arms come down to your side so you can just kind of feel where your shoulder blades and your back are for a moment. We're going to move into the dish rag, which is bringing your arms out to the side as if you were making kind of like a cross out of yourself. So your arms are going to go right 90 degrees out from your side. And I'm going to show you an original version of this. All the cat stretch and Hanna movements really show the influence of his mentorship by Moshe Feldenkrais. And so this is an actual Feldenkrais version of this that I'm going to show you first, which is if you let your elbows bend, so now your fingers are pointing back toward the ceiling, but your upper arms are lying supported on the floor. So just all you're doing is taking that kind of cross lying out with your arms straight out right away from your side at 90 degrees, and then just bending at the elbow. Then turn your palms so that they're facing towards your feet. And take your right hand and let the back of your hand fall back down by your head toward the floor. So you're going to be rotating that upper arm as the hand comes back, and your head turns toward that side, towards the right side. So it's just a coordination of movement, and you may notice that you already get a little bit of a counterbalancing movement of your knees falling across toward the left and a bit of weight in your left hip. And so that's the first part of this movement. And then as you let the hand come back up to center, your head comes towards center, and then as you take your hand past center, now your palm is going to come back down toward the floor, so it's going to be coming towards your hip, as if the palm is going to eventually touch the floor. Your head turns across to the left, and you'll see that there's a bit of a releasing of pressure on that shoulder blade. And so that's the movement as it's coordinated between the head turning and the back of the hand either going to the floor or the palm going to the floor, and the rotation it makes in the shoulder blade. So now let's coordinate them together. So we'll start now with the left hand, and the back of the left hand is going to start coming down toward the floor somewhere by your head, and the right hand is going to go palm toward the floor as it comes down more towards your hip. So they're going in opposite directions. Your head is turning to the left towards that side where the back of your hand is coming toward the floor, or you might think of it as the palm facing straight toward the ceiling. And you'll notice that your knees want to fall across to the right a bit. And then just let that come back up to center. This really helps to start coordinating into arm movement from the shoulders. And then reverse the thing. Come across with your head as the back of your right hand comes down toward the floor. Your left palm comes down toward the floor. Find the end range as your knees fall across toward the left. And then just notice coming back towards center. This is a lovely way of getting the arms moving. You'll notice that as your palm comes down toward the floor on that side, it's often likely that your arm is going to start sneaking down towards your side. So you want to just keep on checking to make sure that your arm stays out at 90 degrees from the torso, your upper arm. So that's the Feldenkrais version of this. Now let your arms drop all the way down to the floor. So you're back in that original cross version of your arms coming straight out 90 degrees from your body. So the Hanna version of this is a real nice subtlety of this, which is instead of your arms kind of doing that rotation with the fingers toward the ceiling, just take the right hand and turn palm down toward the floor as your head turns toward the left. So now you get like this twist going through the whole body, you get this twist going through the whole arm on the right side as your head comes toward the left. And then as your head comes back towards center, you come back towards the neutral position, which is your palm facing toward the ceiling. And then as your head comes across to the right, you keep on twisting that arm so that essentially your thumb is going to be starting to come toward the floor. And just let it twist as far as it can as your head comes across toward the right. And then come back to center. Just gently explore that movement. It's really rotating in the shoulder joint itself. And so sometimes if there's a lot of fixation in a joint, you may find that it brings up some tenderness, so go less. Always go less and just feel into the edge and then release out of it. Now let's put the two sides together. So let's take this right hand and let it turn once more, palm toward the floor. Your head goes toward the left, and therefore your left arm is going to go in the opposite direction of rotating so that the thumb is more toward the floor. And so you get this dish rag idea of the arms going in opposite directions as they rotate, and as your knee falls across toward the right and your head toward the left, you get this twisting going through the spine as well. And the meeting of these two in between the shoulder blades, the twisting of the spine and the twisting between the two arms, really starts helping to bring intelligence into that whole area where things can get very stuck in between the shoulder blades, and helps connect up and down the spine and through the arms. So you can try going across to the opposite side, your head turning toward the right. Your right arm turning more and more so that the thumb is touching the floor on the right side. And you'll find that as the left arm turns more and more, it doesn't just go palm down, but it actually starts turning so that it might start getting the thumb touching the floor as well as they kind of twist in opposite directions. And then just letting your knees fall across to the left. You can get so focused on one part of your body that you can stop the other parts participating. And so what you're looking for with this, as with the steeple, is just noticing for smoothness as you slowly circuit back and forth. So this is the movement that probably has the most smoothness in it, is this and the steeple. And so it really gives you a chance to notice where there's jerkiness in the coordination of the movement, where there's a gap in your sensory motor activity, and to just slowly move back and forth and notice how the smoothness slowly comes in as you pay attention to the sensations. And then just come to the center place again and let yourself just take in what you're experiencing. How's your back and your arms, your neck, pelvis, and your legs? I'll get you to turn onto your left side. And the position is with your legs bent 90 degrees at the hip, 90 degrees at the knee, as if you were sitting sideways on the floor in a chair, you might say. And your left arm is up underneath your head as much as that's possible. So your ear perhaps resting on the arm, your arm reaching out along the floor, palm up. And your right hand and arm come up, and your hand cups your head. So your fingers are kind of reaching a little bit around towards where that left ear is, and your elbows, as much as it's possible for it, to reach up or point up towards the ceiling. And the movement is the thighs stay together as the right foot starts to come up. So there's a rotation of the thigh as it stays in contact with the left thigh, so that you get a bit of engagement. You'll feel right up into the hip as you get that rotation in the hip joint. And at the same time, your upper body starts, the head and the arm unit come up together with the feel of lengthening through the left side of the neck, bit of engagement through the right side of the body. And if you feel any scrunchiness in your neck, just go as far again as it feels like it's the end range for you at this moment, where it just wants to go where the greatest ease is, and then watch the slow letting down from any resistances. This is one of the movements, because you really come up into gravity, where there's a lot of weight and a lot of possibility of going into dysfunction. So really make it minimalist and feel into it. And then once you come back down to neutral again, then you lengthen out through your leg, your upper right leg and your upper right arm along the floor, so that you get a lengthening through the whole right side of your body. And you'll feel how, like a slinky, again, you get this scrunching up on the left side of your body. So it's a bit of an arching along the floor, and maybe even a bit of a drawing of your shoulder blade and your hip in toward each other a bit. And just, if it's possible, to kind of run that hand over top of the lower hand and reach out beyond its fingers with your right arm. But whatever allows you to get the sense of lengthening out through the upper side of the body. And you can use a lengthening to go even out through your heel or the ball of your foot on this right leg, just to kind of feel how it can engage in different ways. And then just let that ease off. Come back to neutral, which in this case is back to that initial position. And then once you're in that position and feel where you are, once again, just let the foot come up, the right foot come up, your right head, right side of your head, and your right arm come up, and just feel what it's like now. How much can you get the feel of flattening and lengthening through the left side of your body as the right side comes up and in. And then just let yourself come back down again. Now let's try this on the opposite side. So just flop across onto the right side of your body. This is one of these movements which really gives you a chance to feel how engaging one side really starts to awaken the sense of connection on the other side. So let's just give ourselves a chance to feel that. Your right arm up underneath your head, your left hand and arm cupping the head as your elbow goes toward the ceiling, and then just initiating with your head coming up and the foot coming up, and just feel how does that engage the sense of lengthening through the lower side of your body, more connection to the floor, shortening through the left side of your body. Feel the end range wherever that is, then slowly let yourself back down from that so you can feel what it's like to find that pathway back to the beginning place, and then reaching with your left arm along the floor somewhere parallel or beside that right arm, and your leg lengthening out so you get that whole lengthening through the left side of your body and engagement or arching through the right side. And then just let yourself ease off. So in this case, your arms go slightly apart as if you were going to be somebody caught in a photo of doing a jumping jack. So your arms are slightly out at angles wherever they are comfortable going. And as you feel yourself in this kind of X position, you can do multiple things to engage yourself. And I'm just going to explore some of the possibilities with you. So for example, you could start finding your left arm and shoulder blade and engaging and pulling in towards center with it a little bit, feeling how far it wants to go, and then just letting it ease off a bit again. So that's one possibility. The next one is that you could lengthen out. Let's try that through that left arm again. So just feeling that kind of amoeba-like lengthening out through the left arm. And as you do start to initiate these movements, starting to notice where else in your body there are engagements. So for example, sometimes you'll feel the pulling in of the right arm and shoulder blade as you lengthen out through the left, or you may notice some shifts starting to happen in how your legs want to move. And so each one of those becomes an interesting curiosity of how they're connected through the core of your body, and then just easing off again. So you could do the same thing by now coming across to the right and trying, first of all, lengthening out a little bit through the right arm, feeling how that affects the left arm and shoulder, how it affects your legs, letting that ease off, and then engaging and pulling in with the left arm and shoulder blade and noticing what it does through the rest of your body. As you do that, you may notice that it also affects your spine, so your head is likely going to turn or fall across toward the side where you're pulling in, and turn away from the side where you're lengthening out. And that kind of shows you how the spine is engaging with this. Let's come down to your legs and notice the connection to your hips and legs. So if you come to your left leg and feel how it can lengthen out, and notice how that affects your shoulders, arms, and the right leg, and your spine, and just kind of play with that a little bit. Just feel where you get in the way of that. And then just let it ease off. Try lengthening out through the right leg. Notice how the rest of your limbs respond to this. You'll notice after a while that it's almost as if there are strings of connection from one arm to the diagonal leg, that as one lengthens, the other one draws in towards center, and that the movement goes pretty much through the belly button. So that's sort of the epicenter, the original primordial epicenter, like in a starfish, of movement in the body. It's where embryo movement starts. And so to just kind of feel how that movement can kind of coordinate across the center, the core, the umbilical area, is can really help it feel its connection through your torso. And so after a while, you can just play with these. You can notice, for example, that drawing in with your right leg actually creates a drawing in with your right arm and shoulder. So you're shortening on that side. This is like muscles of the waist, and lengthening through the left side. And each way that you notice, whether it's a diagonal or one side, you'll find that there's an awakening of your understanding of how your body coordinates these movements, and really draws upon all the awakening that we've done so far with this. As you just lay on the floor without having done all of these previously, your X might be a very different X, very different level of engagement than it is at this point. I'll get you to turn your head to the left, so your right arm is going to come down by your side. And similarly to some of the diagonal movements we have, there's going to be an engagement of your arm on the left side, so it's going to come up somewhere by your head. Now, this is something which differs per person. Like, some people like to actually rest their cheek onto the back of their hand. Some people like to just have the hand somewhere nearby their head, the elbow bent, and the palm is flat facing down toward the floor. Whatever works for you, but essentially your intention is that you're going to want, once again, the head and the arm to move as a unit. So whatever is going to help you get the sense of that, you can explore that kind of idea. So with the Superman, we'll start once again with the lower body. You're going to start, in this case, with the right leg and start to notice what it's like to take that leg up into gravity. The beginnings of your letting your leg come up off the floor movement, you might notice, starts with a little bit of a creeping along the floor, a lengthening of that leg and a shortening of the left leg. And then just let that come back down. Your leg may not even have come off the ground at this point, which is, it's always just about what is the length of the range of ease that we're looking for. The upper body movement is that your head and your shoulder arm complex is going to come off the floor together with a little bit of a sense that you're going to be doing a slight twist, or as if you were going to be shoulder checking. So the elbow comes up, your head comes up, but it's not just straight lift. It's a little, got just a slight sense of a twist. And you might notice that then you get more engagement through the left thigh into the floor, and maybe your right leg wants to come up all by itself. And just noticing how all of those connect together, and then slowly come back down. Like the muscles of the waist, sometimes this movement can put some strain into the neck, so you really want to be minimalist with this as well and really focus on the letting down from the movement. Now let's try the opposite side. So let your head turn toward the right. Your right hand comes up to its position of bent elbow and palm and hand somewhere up by your head. And so your left arm is going to come down by your side. Just let yourself find your connection. Locate yourself there for a moment. And then let's come down to this left leg a little bit and see what happens if we start engaging with it as if we were thinking of bringing it up off the floor, and just see how far it wants to go. Does it actually leave the floor? Does it have the same sense of lengthening as the right side might have, or more? And just notice how it wants to go, and then just let it come back down to a resting spot. And then come to your upper body and see what it's like to take that right arm and head up off into its very slight sense of shoulder checking. So you're getting a slight rotation. And you may not get much of a sense of rotation initially, but that's kind of where your thinking is going without creating strain. And then slowly letting back down. And then let's try this one more time, engaging with your leg and your upper body together. So what's it like if your upper body comes up and your leg comes up? And is that leg movement any different than the first time? And what's the sense of engagement with your pelvis, with your right leg and thigh? And then slowly letting yourself feel what it's like to let down from that. So that's the Superman, and you can see we're starting to head into diagonals again. And we're also going to start to follow this more and more into the lower body. So the next movement is the skiing motion. And for this one, you rotate back onto your back. Your arms are somewhere down by your side, wherever they're comfortable. And if you bring your focus into your right leg, then what you're going to do is you're going to start to turn your right foot inward so it's pointing a little bit toward the left foot. And you'll notice already your knee falls out a little bit to the right. And then you're going to just gently stroke with your sole of your right foot up along the inside of your left leg until you get to about the knee, just letting the right knee fall out as far as it wants to go. And you never really touch the floor with your foot. It's just gently stroking along the left inner leg up to about the level of the knee. And then just slowly let it stroke back down towards the initial resting position. Now there's not as much of a focus on the upper body with this one. It's very much a lower body one, but I'll show you some of the supporting pieces that can happen with the upper body. So come back once again with your right foot turning inward, stroke along that left leg and let your head fall out to the left a little bit. And maybe even your left arm opens outward, rotates outward a little bit. So you get a little bit more pressure into that left shoulder blade, and you'll notice now that it balances with a little bit more pressure into the right hip. And then just let your foot come back down. Now let's try this with the opposite side. So let your left foot turn inward a little bit, stroke up along the right leg toward the knee, and your head turns out toward the right. Your right arm turns outward a little bit until you get that sense of engagement into the right shoulder blade a bit and the left hip. Hang out there, just feeling that arch and curl thing of slight engagement through the back of the body and slight opening through the front, and then just come back towards center. So this is a lovely way of just getting the sense of how that opening in the hip coordinates all the way through the upper body. There's a second part to this which is a little bit more challenging. So if you come back to the right leg, now we're going to work on inward rotation. So the first part is that you're going to start thinking of turning your sole of your foot outward toward the right, as if you were going to touch something to the right of you, which means your leg's going to start to turn inward a bit. Not quite as easy to do, but that knee is going to that right knee is going to fall a little bit down toward the left knee as you start to bring the foot as if you were stroking along something to the right of you and up to about the same level as you did on the right foot going inward. And your right knee falls down toward the left knee. But the tricky part is, once again, you don't want to support your foot on the floor. So it's just kind of moving along, just ghosting above the floor. You can slightly touch the floor, but you shouldn't be supporting on the floor. And at the same time, your head turns out toward the right. Your head is always turning in the direction that the sole of your foot is facing, as a way of thinking about it. So you should get a little bit more weight into the left hip and into the right shoulder. And only go as far as it feels comfortable. This is one of those ones that's easy to go into strain. There's a lot of restriction on internal rotation around the hip. There's probably few movements around that locate the limitations in that movement of inward rotation and then help connect it through the whole rest of the body. So it's a really lovely way of doing that. So let's try this on the opposite side now. So left foot starts to turn the sole of the foot outward, the knee falls down toward the right knee, your head turns toward the left. Your left arm turns outward, opening up a bit, and just find the end range. And then slowly come back down. A wonderful movement for starting to kind of get how walking patterns move from the hips down through the legs, through the knees and into the ankles. And then just letting yourself take that in. And you can do that in any combination. You could just focus on the right side for a while and then move across to the left. You could just do just inward rotations on first the right and then the left, and then come back and try external rotations on the right and the left. There's so many ways you can amuse yourself with this and keep it engaging. And so this is very, very useful, but as you can see, a little bit challenging. Let's just come into it one more time, stroking with your right foot along the inside of the left leg, letting your head turn across to the left, letting that knee fall out to the right. Slowly stroking back down towards center. Now we'll stay this time on the right side and do the external rotation part. So let your head turn toward the right, let your foot come toward the right as your knee falls down toward the left knee, and you're just turning out toward the right and feeling that pressure into the left hip, right shoulder, and then just letting the movement come back down straight again. Just feeling the difference between the right and the left for a moment. And now we'll come with the right foot, or now we'll come with the left foot, stroking along the inside of the right leg. Your head turns toward the right. Knee falls out on the left, feeling that engagement, the right shoulder and the left hip. And slowly easing back down, letting that rest for just a moment, and then foot turning outward to the left, knee falling down toward the right, head turning toward the left, and feeling that pressure between the right hip and the left shoulder blade. And slowly come back down again. But it looks like this. It's as if you're sitting on the floor with your left knee bent and your foot coming out toward the right. If you can't quite visualize this, you might have to take a look at me doing it. And your right knee bent with your foot also coming out toward the right. Then, to help support you, your left hand comes down toward the floor, so it kind of helps you get a little bit more on top of those sit bones. Some people find that getting a little cushion under the sit bones can help them get there, but this may not be a movement which works so well for you. A lot of its focus is to really take that movement that happens at the hip and start to take it back through the core, and very importantly, up into the head. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about the head neck piece of this. And because of that, you can do this movement in a chair. So you can also sit in a chair if your pelvis isn't very good at sitting on the floor like this. So the upper body parts of this that you can do sitting in a chair is now to bring your right arm up, so that as if you were going to point straight out parallel to the floor, and then bend at the elbow and bring that hand across to your left shoulder. So it's just touching the shoulder. You just want to kind of, once again, make the movement work as a unit. And then as a unit, you let your elbow head turn toward the right and just take it to wherever its comfort is in end range, but you really don't kind of push beyond where the arm is going. Like, you stay about looking at your elbow as you go across, and then come back to center, and you can go past center and turn a little bit to the left, and try not to go too much past where your elbow's going with your head at this point. So your nose and elbow are going somewhat similarly together, and then coming back. So that's the first level of the movement. Then you can really start taking this into neck and actually eye tracking movements. So for example, you can start to rotate to the right and let your head go a little bit further, and then let it stay there as your elbow and shoulder come back toward the left. And just feel what it's like to kind of feel the difference in movement as you hold your head where it was and let the torso come back towards center, and then slowly let it come back toward the right, meet with where the head is, and then the head can come back with it as it comes back toward the left. You can also do movements where you take your head in the opposite direction. So as your elbow comes across to the right, you could explore letting your head turn toward the left. And these are ways of really letting your neck and torso start to differentiate themselves. And then you can totally reverse that. So your head slowly turning across to the right as your elbow turns across to the left. Now, one of the things you'll notice with this movement is that if you were just to take your eyes and track along something like a countertop or an edge of where a ceiling meets a wall, that if you just tracked with your eyes as you were turning across like this, you might notice that your eyes every once in a while jump, or even if you just stood steady, like without turning your head, and just let your eyes track across the room, you might notice also that your eyes every once in a while jump across or along that line. Those are the places where there's a disconnect between neck movement muscles and eye tracking. And it's a very important piece of how we keep ourselves balanced in our upper body. So this movement is a really good way of catching some of that by getting the eyes and the neck and the torso to move in different ways and get more sophisticated. So for example, aside from that just tracking along a line, which is therapeutic in itself, you can also do this. You could take your elbow off to the right, your head toward the left, and then as you come back towards center, you could keep your eyes looking out toward the left as your head came across to the right. And then you could start reversing that. So as your head came back across to the left, you could let your eyes turn across to the right. Now initially this may feel a lot like as if your eyes are following your elbow essentially. Feel a lot like patting your head and rubbing your tummy. But if you just keep on looking for the smoothness, similar as we were doing with the steeple and with the dish rag, you'll find that gradually you start dropping out of your effortfulness and you can just start to feel the connection. Now, of course, you do this movement on the opposite side as well. If you're capable of doing it sitting on the floor, then you would do that by just changing position. If you're sitting in a chair, well, it's much simpler. You just bring in up your left arm and start following the same movements of head, first of all, just following your elbow, your nose following your elbow, and then starting to break it up, letting your head go in opposite directions from your elbow. And then if you feel really adventuresome, starting to notice what happens if you separate your eyes and your head movement so your eyes are following your elbow as your head turns in the opposite direction. But these are very subtle connections. You don't get the same kind of effort as you did with, say, like muscles of the waist, but very importantly, you can still get into, you'll still notice where you're using unnecessary effort at very deep, sophisticated, well, not so sophisticated levels. So to go very slow with this, maybe just trying the tracking with your eyes along a line in your household, you'll find that gradually your neck starts to relax and become much more like a bobblehead, like something floating on the surface of the ocean, as it follows this tracking and lets down from this grip that it might have been in previously to that. So as we come to the end of this full series, I would just invite you to come back down onto the floor and then to explore what is my arch and curl like now. And just to notice, for example, if as you go into the arch in whatever way it speaks to you, for example, with your arms turning outward, your back arching all the way up into your neck, feeling the pressure into the back of your neck and head, and then going into the neutral position in between them, and then flattening in your lower back, back of your head lightening on the table, on the floor, and just feeling how your arms can turn inward to support that. Or if you do the version with your hands cupped behind your neck or head, so that you get the whole unit of your shoulders and arms going together with the arching and curling of your head, and just trying that 2 or 3 times. And then coming back to a resting position.